There is this deep subconscious craving to know about life's purpose and future, driven by curiosity, perhaps greed, fear of tomorrow, or fear of karma. At times, the cravings surface loud and clear and drive us to seek. And we seek, not knowing what we are seeking. Is there a ground plan with which we are here? Who draws these plans anyways? What if I want to make changes? What if I want to design my life?
Before coming to the field of astrology, I was a banker. I was the chief manager in State Bank of India. I was heading the computer division. I was totally into software programming and I was software testing. I was also the head of research wing. So I had a lot of interest in logic and reasoning. And astrology I thought was a subject which was totally removed from logic and reasoning. And one of my friends, very good friends, she fell sick. I could see her collapsing before my very own eyes. So I just wanted to know the reason, because medical science, it didn't give me any logic. And what really drew me to this group was the fact that there were lots of people who have studied in IITs, IIMs, so very scientifically oriented. It was not a mystical subject anymore, It had a logic, it had a reasoning.
If I go in to study mathematics, I need to have a clear understanding of what I need to do, right? At the same time, I also need to have an understanding what I'm not there for. So I'm not going to do a PhD in mathematics because I want help in buying vegetables. That's bizarre. Unfortunately, that's what people are thinking today. The first thing you say Jyotish and people say, oh, you believe in it? You think, a one-page document could help people get married? And I said, oh, this is bizarre. You can't expect Jyotish is not a subject to study to match two horoscopes. That's a very small application, teeny tiny application. Jyotish is far bigger.
It doesn't matter how hard you are working, it doesn't matter how good you are, there is something beyond all of this. You do get up to a certain level answers, right? But you don't get the deeper understanding or meaning of why something is happening. And that's what led me to the exploration of Jyotish. Because what I realize over here, and I've been doing this course for the past 1 year now, is it goes so fundamentally into our living lives. And it is so well connected to basic commonsensical themes that you really don't need too much complexity in life.
I really look forward to it because there is a treasure of knowledge and something which is very fundamental, possibly over a period of time a lot of us lost track of, and it's very important for us to keep that knowledge going to the future. So it opens multiple dimensions of reality and truth around us, and that's the most exciting fact. Ultimately we realize that no single aspect of life is completely good or completely bad.
Astrology has its strongest weapon, relativity, and is based on the truth that ethereal vibrations extend from the sun to the great planets and from planet to planet. All space is a network of interacting forces. Thanks to the efforts of Dr. B.V. Raman, an ancient Vedic discipline has been given dignity and credibility. What was once scoffed as being superstitious has now come to be recognized as a science and taught systematically. So how scientific and precise is it?
You can't bring in political matters to the laboratory, and for that reason you can't say political science is not science. What do you mean by science? Systematized knowledge according to the dictionary. That way, astrology is a very well structured and systematized body of knowledge. Or for science, it has to answer the test of replication, like g equals 32 feet per second squared. Now, no matter where you do the experiment or who does it, the result should be the same. But if you go to the balcony and drop a wad of cotton, it doesn't hit the ground at 32 feet per second squared. It will just waft away somewhere, right? Why? So this is not true, is it, what they are saying? It's because the controlled conditions of the lab do not exist there.
They're extremely accurate. Precision level in terms of microseconds. Interestingly, the formulas that today the ISRO scientists use to go to Chandrayaan, the elliptical formulas that we use, are the same formulas that are being used everywhere. The ephemeris that we all use is very much the same as what a NASA publishes or an ISRO publishes. So there is no difference there. These things are mathematical computations. The beauty of nature is it works in a particular rhythm.
And from how long ago were the ancient Indians able to perceive and measure this rhythm? The renowned leader and forerunner of India's freedom struggle and an erudite multidisciplinary scholar, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, created a radically new paradigm in two brilliant research works, Orion and Arctic Home in the Vedas. Based on evidence from the Zoroastrian Avesta and astronomical observations during the Vedic periods, Tilak attributes the beginnings of Aryan civilization to the post-glacial age of 8000 BCE, much before the age of the oldest known Vedic period in India, around 4500 BCE. The Avesta expressly tells us that the happy land of Aryano Vejo, or the Aryan paradise, was located in a region where the sun shone just once a year and was destroyed by the invasion of snow, necessitating its inhabitants to migrate southward. Indeed, there are many passages in the Rig Veda which disclose the polar attributes of the Vedic deities and the traces of an ancient Arctic calendar. These simple statements, along with the latest geological researches of the glacial and the post-glacial epoch, clearly show that the ancestors of the Rig Vedic seers living in the Arctic regions already possessed the astronomical ability to track the movements of the luminaries, including the sun, moon, and other planets.
So we don't know how they were able to get all that knowledge. Much of it was, you could say, through tapasya or revealed knowledge. Like even Einstein has E equals mc squared and the Mendeleev table in chemistry, they were all revealed knowledge, right? Then they worked backwards and came up with the steps to explain the table and his theory. So there is, modern science relies only on the five sensory organs and the intellect. These are its tools. But there is something beyond the intellect which can be achieved through yoga, and which is what the ancient Maharishis of India had in their power.
Some of our ancient rishis are nothing but scientists, right? They had instruments that could cut the hair, the human hair, they could cut it longitudinally into 6 parts. And there are references there in our Samhitas.
Operating from a state of philosophical wonder, the Vedic Aryans began to observe the heavens and correlate this astronomical knowledge with earthly human life. Several thousand years of meticulous observation led to the mother matrix of Vedic astronomy, giving birth to a new esoteric branch, Vedanga Jyotisha. Vedanga Jyotisha is indeed one of the 6 Vedangas or auxiliary disciplines associated with the study of the Vedas. The oldest available, most authoritative text on Vedanga Jyotisha, dating back to around 3100 BCE, is the Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra, the magnificent lifetime work of Maharishi Parasara, his son Vedavyasa, author of the epic Mahabharata, and their great disciple Maharishi Jaimini. The earliest known text on Vedic astronomy, aptly titled Vedanga Jyotisha, is a colossal intellectual data of several centuries compiled by Maharishi Lagada in 1300 BCE, much later than Parasara's Horashastra. Although the Horashastra elaborates on 18 Siddhantas, a Sanskrit word denoting an established theory, it was much later in 505 BCE that Varaha Mihira revived 5 of these 18 and called it Pancha Siddhantika. The 5 are Surya Siddhanta, Paitamaha Siddhanta, Vasishta Siddhanta, Romaka Siddhanta, and Paulisa Siddhanta. Several misnomers have been circulated attributing the names of the zodiac signs and horoscopic planetary astrology itself to be of Babylonian origin. Well, while the Babylonian texts date to around 1800 BCE, the names of the zodiac and precision of equinoxes is mentioned in Hora Shastra, which dates back to a much earlier period of 3100 BCE. As a subject, we could say Vedanga Jyotisha is broadly classified into Siddhanta, Samhita, and Hora Shastra. Siddhanta deals with the study of celestial objects and is divided into Gola or positional astronomy and Ganita or mathematics for performing astronomical analytics. Samhita or mundane astrology deals with applying the analytics for the study of collectives like nations and cultures, giving a broader perspective. Hora Shastra deals with personal destiny and is divided into Palita or Jataka based on time of birth, Prashna based on time of question, and Muhurta based on auspicious time.
But then in order to even begin grasping that, you first have to understand what is it that I'm studying. So if I give you a very basic question like what is 2 plus 2, you could do it mentally or you could do it on your fingers. You could take out a pen and paper and do it, or you could pull out a calculator, right? So the first way is Antrik, second way is Mantrik, third way is Tantric, and the fourth way is Yantrik. Today we are completely stuck in the Yantrik world and we are unable to even comprehend that there is something totally Antrik and Mantrik and Tantric, right?
Today, there are a lot of new technologies that are there in the world, right? We talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about machine learning, we talk about 3D printing, we talk about electrical vehicles. Now, there's also a concept called big data analytics. So, big data analytics essentially is understanding the data and finding out certain patterns that constantly repeat within itself. Vedic astrology has actually evolved in that way. We basically take huge amounts of data and map it across multiple parameters. Now, what are these parameters?
The zodiac, or the 360-degree space around the sun, which is divided into 12 equal parts of 30 degrees each. The 12 Rashis, each Rashi being a cluster of stars named by the ancient seers according to their shapes. The 12 houses, which represent the various aspects of life. The Navagraha Devatas, equated to the 9 planets. And the astrological clock time, or one among the 42 systems of time mentioned in the Hora Shastra.
Now, when we look at this, we have found certain patterns that have continuously recurred, and over a period of time, we have perfected our observation and inferences as well. So, Vedic astrology, that's why it is a part of the Sanatana Dharma. Dharma means to do it right, to act right. Again, in our modern language, it's called best practices. Sanatana basically means eternal. So, Sanatana Dharma literally translates to eternal best practices.
Standing near an 18th century instrument, a sundial to measure the time of the day, one wonders how these best practices evolved as they were handed down through generations.
Now, a long time back they had the Brigus. The Brigus were recorders of the life events. So you have Brigus all over the country. And based upon the Brigus, a whole study was made, and from there Parashara took out the aphorisms. So there were 18 rishis involved in this hard work. Rishis were sort of researchers or the scientists who did this whole work.
The whole of Jyotish is a treasure chest of sutras. Now, if it is really a sutra, then you must be able to apply the sutra uniformly in 1000 charts. It's like a carpenter's toolkit. You know, carpenter has got wrenches of various sizes and screwdrivers of various sizes. And similarly, you've got this sutra box and a very huge repertoire of sutras. And once you have got sufficient familiarity with all the sutras, then the moment you look at any chart, then immediately that sutra will realize itself in that chart.
As compared to any other branch of Shastra, say for example Ayurveda or Natya Shastra, Jyotish is a secret knowledge. So the rishis did not want this knowledge to go into everybody's hand, because there is a chance that this knowledge can be misused, especially in terms, we are discussing our weaknesses, our vulnerabilities, all right? Also all about our longevity, so enemies can hit you. So they didn't want this knowledge to be misused. That is why Jyotish in Shastra is very coded. So if you just get a Sanskrit scholar who doesn't know Jyotish, they can just recite it like a shloka and they'll give you a face value translation which doesn't actually tell you what the Rishi is trying to say.
Gemini is completely encrypted. True science, and before people talk about software encryption and all, you find encryption in Gemini. That is the Vedic way of encryption called Katpayadi Varga, and one sutra, say around 5 words, can be expanded into 600 pages. That is the scope of Gemini Maharshi, because each word can be interpreted in so many ways.
Does this vast, uninhibited fabric of interpretation inhibit our movements like a puppet? Which brings us to the most debated topic of destiny versus free will.
Any aspect we want to look at, astrology is like a GPS. It clearly tells you this is the path that is looking at, and here are the road humps that you have, here is the traffic that is there. Now once you are empowered with this information, you can use your intelligence to navigate your own life. The only two things that are not in our control is birth and death. But everything else is something that we can take control of, and astrology helps you take control over this. Let us assume that I have a small box in front of me, a cube, right? How many sides does the cube have? 6 sides. Now let's assume that this is front. Now suppose I turn this box by 90 degrees. Now which is front?
The one which is on top.
So essentially what is happening is you are saying that this is front because you are taking me as a reference. So we are applying something called a relative concept, right? Now in Vedic astrology, if you truly need to understand how this works, you should remove this relativity completely and you should always speak in an absolute language. So let me still take the same box. I say instead of 6 sides, it has 2 sides, the inside and the outside. Now I take this box and I keep it in the moon, Mars, wherever it is. Still when I say that this brick is inside the box, you exactly know where it is. Now let me replace this entire box with a human body. What do you call that which is outside us? Can we call it nature? Now what is inside us? Can we call it the body itself, me? What nature gives to us, do we have control over it? No. So fate is essentially what nature gives to us. But what we could do is, we have the ability to give a response back to nature. And that is what is called free will.
Destiny normally is seen as something very negative. Not in India. Because we Indians have our own English. Okay? And we think destiny is both good and bad. But normally in the West, the word destiny connotes something negative. So let's even assume it's something negative. That okay, something bad is supposed to happen and it is going to happen and you can't do anything about it. That's wrong. If that is true, why am I making a prayer? We have a concept called upachaya, or the houses of growth. Now, what do you mean by growth? Growth means I have an option to grow or not to grow. So that means I have options. And normally the houses, there are 12 signs or 12 houses. Of these, 4 of them are upachayas. So even from a very basic mathematical viewpoint, if I were to take 12 signs and I have 4 options out of 12, prima facie 33% freedom I already have.
Purushakarena daivam na siddhyate. That is, without human effort, even what is ordained will not be obtained. So effort is emphasized at every stage. And what the planetary positions show are only indications.
You open the daily newspaper, you look at life. Now you find that life is a continuous oscillation from the bank of pleasure and fulfillment to the bank of pain and disappointment. So there is continuous oscillation. Sometimes what you conceive and what you want happens in life, and sometimes it doesn't happen. So both things are happening. So there is bondage to destiny on the one hand, which is a bondage which is irrevocable, and then on the other hand, there is the power of free will and the power of self-determination, which helps you to achieve what you preconceive. It is not that the power of intention or the power of sankalpa is equitably distributed among human beings. That's not the case. So if you line up about 100 people and look at their intention and the power to find fulfillment in life, now it's a very inhomogeneously distributed. Some people are very empowered, so they'll be able to achieve what they conceive, and some people, however hard they try, they won't be able to make progress. So it's a very individual dependent thing.
The study of Jyotish or the life in Jyotish is a sadhana, and this sadhana is lifelong. It is never ending, and the moment you stop it, that means your view has become that much limited. Jyotish is supposed to be the eyes of the Veda, so Jyotish is also called Veda Chakshu. Jyotish has the power to see, not just see from here to here, but see beyond. So true Jyotishi is Trikalagya, who can at once see the three kalas.
Indeed, the ancients, even in other parts of the world, learnt to see beyond. Astrology was taught as a subject at the finest Italian universities as part of Mathematicus, which included mathematics, astrology and astronomy as early as the 16th century. While teaching at the University of Padua, the distinguished astronomer Galileo wrote the book Astrologica Nonnulla, which contained horoscopes. Back in India, the astrological e-magazine was launched in 1895 by Dr. B. Suryanarayana Rao. 120 years later, two versions of the magazine exist. The astrological e-magazine, edited by his great-grandson Niranjan Babu, and the modern astrology magazine, edited by his great-granddaughter Gayatri Devi Vasudev, both considered authentic sources of knowledge in their own rights. Although astrology was taught in a few institutions, like the Indian Council for Astrological Sciences, founded by Dr. Suryanarayana Rao's grandson Dr. B.V. Raman in 1984, it was only in 2001 that the University Grants Commission introduced graduate and postgraduate courses in astrology in the colleges in India. The introduction of Jyotirvigyan, as it was called, was opposed by a group of scientists through a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court, but the case was eventually dismissed.
And they said it comes from religion, and therefore it is something religious, not science. And the court also dismissed that point, also saying it is nothing to do with religion, because the argument put was, if modern medicine has come from the West, where it is Christianity, do you call it a Christian science? No, you don't. Likewise, astrology in ancient days was fostered in temples. So all the sciences, basically all the arts were taught in temple premises. So it got the tag of religion, but it really has nothing to do with religion.
The beauty of the parampara is it takes Jyotish and it takes the books like the Puranas, like for example the Shiva Mahapurana. Okay, now the Shiva Mahapurana is in 7 volumes, and each of these volumes is related to one of the 7 major chakras in your body, and each of these books has tremendous amount of knowledge. So when we study one of these books, what the parampara does, it tells us these has got certain remedies, some medicines, some ways of healing. There are mantras of how to go about doing it, and these have to be used for the Jyotish. Hora Shastra is about studying the chart and finding out what the diseases, suffering and what life is about. And the remedies are in a separate book. That book, which is the separate book for remedies, also has a certain amount of religion in it. So it's very interesting to know that they kept the Hora Shastra separate from the remedies. I have, let's say, Islamic students. Somebody says, what about the 99 names of Allah? Is there a way to correlate this in the chart? So I developed a mathematical formula for that. And based upon your chart, for each planet, we can easily correlate one of the 99 names. So we tried that, and I have been telling some of them, okay, you have this problem, why don't you chant this name, maybe Bismillah.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
It's interesting, right? Because the Hora Shastra is a mathematics. I can use it with any religion provided I understand some part of it.
The Hindus worship the manifestation of the cosmic life energies of the planets as Dasa Avatar or 10 incarnations.
Matsya is considered to be an incarnation of the Ketu cosmic life energy. Kurma is the tortoise, is the Saturn cosmic life energy. Varaha, the boar, and that is the Rahu cosmic life energy. Sri Ramachandra is the Surya cosmic life energy. Krishna Paramatma is the moon cosmic life energy. And then Kalki is supposed to be a conglomeration of everything. Now in Jainism, you don't have 10 avatars, but you have 24 avatars. But they are called by a different name. They are called Tirthankaras. And the Tirthankaras are worshipped as manifestations of the cosmic life energy of the Navagraha Devatas. For example, Mahavira, who is the 24th and the last Tirthankara in the Jaina religion, he is considered to be a manifestation or an avatar of the Saturn cosmic life energies.
See, astrology that way is both art and science. You take these medical reports, they will give you a clue to what is wrong with the system. But the doctor has to exercise his discretion also in deciding on how to go about treating, whether surgery is needed or just palliative care is enough. Likewise, in astrology too, it is a matter of individual competence.
So if we keep Jyotish as an aspect, and just that part, yes, that is science. But the remedy part, the mantra part, those things, you can't call that science. There really is no way to measure it.
While the basis of astrology is scientific, from time immemorial, people do attach a spiritual connotation to it, which is far beyond religious boundaries.
When I was into management and running in the rat race, I wanted to be employed by the best organization possible. But after getting in here, I understood that I have been employed by the best employer, the divine himself. So this subject itself is a spiritual in nature.
The divine is central to the whole of life in the Vedic worldview. Now you come to the modern world, the divine is not in your dictionary. It's not there anywhere, which is part of the trouble why astrology is so strongly opposed by rationalists.
I learned that my decision in my life and future steps were basically divinely orchestrated. We can lead our lives with the guidance of this amazing knowledge and wisdom.
At my 20 years old, after studying 4 years of psychology, I decided to travel to India. I was in a very deep quest of self-knowing, of understanding deeper my mind, and also wanting to know about Indian ethos and spirituality. Astrology helped me to process a conflict I had, and that was really important, and provide me the understanding that there's nobody doing wrong to us. It's always that. It's always the divine working through every person.
Now if you look at India and you look at America, in America, leave alone the Christian part of America, which is very divine-centric, there's a large part of America, there's no God, okay, in the Western society. You come to India, we talk too much about God. But if you look at India and you look at America, I don't want to hurt the feeling of Indians, but I'm going to say a home truth. America and the West is a high achievement society, and India is a low achievement society, because we are satisfied with small achievements, because we have handed over our power to God. So now we've got to take back that power. Now the God in the temple actually represents the Atmic power. The doing is not as important as the attitudinal infusions which have to take place. They are the key. Now if you think all power is in some deity, and you are nobody at all, you are just some funny dry leaf of a tree, then that is one way of living life. You hand over your power to the divine and you say, I am nobody. But then there is another way of living life where you realize that the divine is actually abiding in the heart, and that's the holy place of the divine. Realizing that and staying close to the divine, you act from there, ensuring these infusions of bhakti, jnana, sankalpa, and then shraddha. Then you will be able to even create miracles, which formerly you will attribute to God.
The object is there just to aid your faith. Faith by itself doesn't need an object. And it could just be a sound. You got faith in a sound. You got faith in a dream. You got faith on a memory. I mean, faith is something very beautiful, and that is what really makes us strong from inside. It takes out the best qualities in us. So the idea is to encourage that faith, what they already have, rather than pushing something else on them, because that spoils the beauty of the science. Vedic sciences are meant for everybody. It is not just for one person or one community. It's meant for the world.
The higher reaches of the spiritual life commence only from the milestone of faith, and it's based on inquiry. It's called Atma Vichara and or Atma Jnana. You've got to find out who you are. And once you get that higher understanding through inquiry, then faith can be dispensed with. Faith is more like a scaffolding you need before you erect a structure. Now once you have established the structure, do you still keep the scaffolding? No, you dispense with it, right? Therefore faith becomes unnecessary because it's been superseded by crystal clear, insightful understanding.
While the roots still remain embedded in the Vedas, a more contemporary approach to astrology is being practiced by several astrologers the world over. The systems approach, as it is called, was founded by Professor V.K. Chaudhary.
The goals of life have changed. Earlier, when Vedic astrology was being composed by sage Parashara, at that time goal of life was achieving salvation or moksha, that you do not want to come to this earth again and again and getting merged with the Supreme Soul. At that time, those planets which gave you fame, family, they were known as markas. That is basically a spiritual death of the person. That person has missed this opportunity in this life. But now, in my practice, 85% people or close to 90% people have these 4 problems only. People come that I am not getting married, I want a US visa, I want a good job, I want a lot of money. So if these things are absent, they think that they have failed in life. So now these planets are blessings. A few hundreds of years back, when king sent you to exile, so it was a punishment. Now people want to go in exile from India to US, America, Canada, that they think there is achievement in life, that I have reached there, I have settled there. As an astrologer, we have to see that exile planet has to be stronger. So we have to modify the approach and the basic nature of planets. So at that time those were markas, but now they are karkas. Now they give you things which you want the most. We didn't have printing presses, so we could not print. A text was there which was on Bhojpatra and preserved at a place. So whosoever wanted information for that, they were known as scribes. Scribes will come and they will copy that. So those copies, they lose the originality. Sometimes it is not legible, so they introduce some word which may carry a different meaning. Like very interesting thing is in Vrit Parashar Hora, it says Krur Graha. Krur Graha mean cruel planets. So it is translated in English as cruel, but not malefic. So they said all Krur Graha were treated like malefics, which is not true. Even a father can be of cruel nature, but he will not think bad of his son. He may be very strict, but he is not your enemy. So krurta and cruelty is a nature, not the functional nature. So a system has to be unambiguous, replicable, and very definitive and authoritative in prescribing the remedies and results. That replicable system is reliable.
Space and time are the framework within which the mind constructs its experience of reality. In what way can astrology aid in perceiving this reality?
Astrology is understanding the quality of time. It embodies the truth that each moment of time is unique. It may be good, bad, or different.
Be it the Chinese or the Indians or the Greeks or the Middle Easterners or the far Westerners like Londoners, they all had the 5 element system. And time had to be measured as quality based upon these 5 elements. That's why we have a calendar which goes in weeks and days. But end of the day, to define the quality, how is today? Is today a good day? For that we needed a quality of time measure. That's why we needed a panchang.
With the objective of unifying the divergent practices of calendar systems, the Positional Astronomy Center of the Government of India publishes the Rashtriya Panchang.
We have the thing called Dasha system in Jyotish, which is not there in the West. We do have certain advantages. And if you have the right Dasha for the right chart, then you can tell the person that, look, this may be a good time or may not be a good time to take this decision. So it's all about how your mind is at a time. Dasha is nothing but the state of mind.
So how different is Vedic astrology from the Western system of astrology?
Broadly, you have to look at it in 3 different buckets. The first one is in terms of the scientific spirit and computations that we have. We have a concept called Ainamsha, which Western astrology does not have. As Ainamsha basically recognizes that the earth has 3 motions. Now we all largely know that the earth has 2 motions, right? Rotation and revolution. So rotation is where it spins about the earth's axis, and revolution is where it moves around the sun. Now what we fail to recognize is there's a third motion which is basically happening around the axis of the earth. Let me give you an example. Suppose you have a top and then you spin it. What happens is, one, it goes like that, right? That is what we call as revolution. One, it turns around the center of gravity, right? It's called a rotation. The top also doesn't just stay still, it actually goes like that. That's the third motion of the earth, and that causes what is known as a concept called Ainamsha, where basically we further fine-tune our accuracy levels to that third motion of the earth as well. Western astrology doesn't consider this. And the second bucket where you could probably say is the depth, intellectual depth that we bring in. We talk about time periods. Here we are able to say, okay, Dasha Bhukti, that basically means a person is not going to be still at any point of time. He moves over a period of time. He travels over time from birth to death, and depending on where he is and which space he is in, the reactions would be different. The third aspect about Vedic astrology is Vedic astrology has been designed to empower a person. It has not been designed to predict. That's why Phalani Grahacharena, we use the word. We try to figure out how certain results will be there and how you can be empowered to take control over your life. So unlike other systems of astrology, which is a fatalistic, deterministic science, here the science is more about empowerment.
Is the popular belief that the system of calculating the orbital position, whether tropical zodiac or sidereal zodiac, different in the 2 systems of Western and Vedic astrology?
According to a book called the Vishnu Puran, Parashara teaches in that book that there are 2 zodiacs. One he calls the Niryana and the other one he calls the Sayana. So one is the tropical and one is the sidereal, and both have been mentioned in that ancient book called Vishnu Puran. He also goes on to say that this tropical zodiac is more useful for predicting rain, seasonal changes, weather forecasting, and is very useful for agriculture, which has nothing to do with the stars beyond. It is a very terrestrial phenomena happening because of the sun and the moon and the clouds. But we as souls are not independent of the solar system, nor are we independent of the Milky Way. So the stars in the sky does influence our destinies. So the study of that, how the stars are influencing us, is the real astrology, And if we are taking the stars in the sky into account, we have to use sidereal, because sidereal means mapping with the star. So imagine astrology where none of the stars in the sky are taken into account, and another where the stars are the backdrop. Don't you think, what do you think seems more logical?
Several seekers have taken Vedic astrology to the West, not merely as a subject, but as a profound way of life. Dr. David Frawley, alias Pandit Vamadeva Shastri. Dr. Robert Swoboda. James Braha. Dr. Andrew Foss.
I have customers from all these different schools, and when they've wanted me to add features, supports different schemes or methods they have in their schools, I've been glad to do it because I think it's good work they're doing, and I want to help them in their research and support that. We need more research, we need more understanding, we need more discussion.
How difficult and how much time do these computations take?
Formerly, a Jyotishi will have a band of disciples. They will do the calculation, and the Jyotishi comes into the picture to throw the correct interpretational light. Now, when computers have taken over the drudgery of doing the calculations, now that should be regarded as a tremendous blessing coming to the world of astrologers, so that their energies are liberated. And because their energies are liberated, those energies can now be more creatively diverted to the interpretation and the deeper understanding of every chart.
I think what you need to know is the frameworks of astrology, how certain combinations are there, and you should also understand the science behind why these things have been done.
Now that the high-end software applies the formulas and makes the computations, in what ways or areas can the astrologer use these applications?
What is more important is using Jyotish as a human tool for human life. Okay, and medicine is one area where we can help. By quickly scanning a chart, we can tell which are the weak areas in the body. Once that is known, right from the beginning, the person is aware that these are my weak areas and will also know what I need to do to strengthen that.
It acts like when a newborn is there, one gets a immunization schedule or vaccination schedule from the hospital, that this and this date you get these things done and you will be saved from these diseases.
A kid could start learning certain yoga right from his childhood. Certain Ayurvedic treatment can be started from a very young age as a youth. Why do we have to wait for the disease to onset and then try to cure it? The future of medicine is not just cure. It's more in preventive medicine. That way we'll be saving a fortune in healthcare costs.
As we heard a while ago, the texts that refer to remedial measures that help in improving one's life are independent of the ones that aid in deciphering the status of one's life. What kind of remedies are possible and how helpful are these?
Basically, the chart is a balance sheet of your past karma. The strong planets are the assets, weak planets are liabilities, and whatever afflictions are there or strong negative influences are there, they mean that you have some very negative karma and you need to do some pariharas to lessen those problems. Basically, remedies are divided into two parts. One is strengthening and one is propitiating. Strengthening remedies are for those planets which are weak in your chart. They may be slightly weak or they may be very weak. When planets are very weak, say badly placed and at 0 degrees and combust as well, so the things ruled by those planets do not manifest at all in your life. You have to strengthen those. Strengthenings are done by kavach. or gemstones. There are various methods, even color therapy. But doing all the things even does not guarantee you that you are going to excel in that area. But some amount of makeup is there. You can improve on that. And that depends on the timing of remedy. At which age you are applying that.
How do these remedies actually work? Is there any science behind these remedies at all?
Science behind is when you wear a gemstone of a particular planet, it attracts the wavelength of that particular planet. The stones are receptive to that energy and concentrate that energy, and they are connected with colors also. All the colors which planets relate to, stones are of same color. If you see the website of NASA, the radiation of the planets, the chromatographic color, in which range it falls, you will find almost all of them are broadly in range the color which our text say. Mars is red, Mercury is green, Venus is blue, and even planet which we say hot, cold, the temperatures are like that.
Om Namah Shivaya.
There is a whole subject called Mantra Shastra, the science of sound. Om, one, Nama, see another two, Shivaya. So if I say Om, it's 6. So that's a 6th sound. We call it Shadakshari. If I drop Om and I'm breathing it in, Namah Shivaya. So Namah Shivaya is Panchakshari. So the number of sounds, there's a whole count to that, what it does, how it affects us. So anything which is in 5s tends to impact my consciousness. It has the power to alter my consciousness. It has the power to alter my reality. What is consciousness? My reality. So if I can alter my reality, my prayer has been answered. Let's say the British came to India and said, no, we need to translate all this into English. And say, God is auspicious. Why are you doing Om Namah Shivaya? Do God is auspicious, God is auspicious. Is it the same thing like doing Om Namah Shivaya? Ave Maria is very much Latin. You translate that into English, Hail Mary, Hail Mary, Hail. It's rubbish. Have you heard an Ave Maria singing? It's wonderful.
Moving beyond religion, can Jyotish actually be used to aid one's spiritual progress?
The measurement of nature is science. The understanding of nature is science. Now, what is spirituality? So, while one measures nature, spirituality tells you to become one with nature.
According to Vedanta, there are 5 koshas or layers through which the self evolves spiritually: the Annamaya, Pranamaya, Manomaya, Vijnanamaya, and finally Anandamaya kosha.
So the real definition of spirituality would be to be completely in equilibrium with nature and with oneself, so that there is eternal ananda, bliss available, everlasting peace available. And astrology has very specific set of formulas to figure out how you can mature from Anna all the way to Ananda.
In ancient India, they believed that all subjects were interlinked. If you are a dancer, you understood mudras, and mudras are associated with mantras, and mantras are associated with Jyotish. I mean, that's whole science. You see, everything is linked to everything.
As our Vedic scriptures say, Yat Pinde Tat Brahmande. Indeed, the microcosm and the macrocosm are made up of the same matter. It is overwhelming to realize that I am just a speck, the tiniest part of a humongous system where everything is interdependent and the flow of energy is cyclic. Vedic astrology is a tool that can help me align with the system to the point of traversing beyond the system.
I